In this video, I'm going to show you how a 40-year-old American fell for a scam in Brazil and lost $8,000. I'm going to tell you every detail of this true story, from the moment Mark set foot in Brazil to the most bitter awakening of his life. Stay until the end because the outcome of this story is truly shocking, and I'll give you valuable tips so this never happens to you. Before we start, if you like real stories like this one, hit the like button on the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Also, leave a comment telling me if you've ever been in a strange situation during your travels. And please, don't leave the video now because the ending of this story is really impactful. Mark had always been passionate about Brazil. Since childhood, he had heard stories about the paradise beaches, carnival, the joy of Brazilian people, and that unique way of life you can only find there. At 40 years old, after working hard as an engineer at a tech company in San Francisco, he finally managed to save enough money to fulfill his lifelong dream, to visit Brazil. The trip was planned very carefully. Mark studied Portuguese for months, researched Brazilian culture, the best tourist spots, and even learned some samba steps by watching videos. He was determined to live an authentic experience, away from conventional tourist routes. He wanted to know the real Brazil, talk to Brazilians, try typical food, and blend in with the locals. The flight from San Francisco to Rio de Janeiro lasted almost 15 hours, but Mark was so anxious he could barely sleep during the trip. He kept imagining what it would be like to step on Copacabana's sand, see Christ the Redeemer up close, and feel that unique energy he had always heard about Rio de Janeiro. On the plane, he talked to other passengers, practiced his Portuguese, and even exchanged contacts with some Brazilians who were returning from a trip. When the plane landed at Tom Jobim International Airport, Mark felt an indescribable emotion. It was early March, summer was ending, but the heat was still intense. Leaving the airport, he was immediately enveloped by that humid, tropical climate, the intense movement of people, and the sound of cars and buses. Everything was exactly as he had imagined, but at the same time completely different from anything he had ever experienced. Mark had booked a hotel in Copacabana, very close to the beach. It wasn't a luxury hotel, but it was clean, safe, and in a prime location. He wanted to be close to everything, able to walk to the beach, discover the bars and restaurants in the area, and feel the pulse of the city. The room had a partial ocean view, and Mark spent the first few minutes just contemplating that blue vastness stretching to the horizon. In the first 3 days, Mark lived exactly what he had always dreamed of. He would wake up early, have a typical Brazilian breakfast at the hotel with French bread, cheese, ham, and that strong little coffee he learned to love. Then he would go down to Copacabana Beach and spend hours walking on the sand, watching street vendors, surfers, and families enjoying the sunny day. He visited all the classic tourist spots. He took the train up to Christ the Redeemer and was moved to see that majestic statue up close. The view from up there was simply spectacular. He could see the entire city, the beaches, Rodrigo de Freitas Lagoon, Sugarloaf Mountain in the distance. Mark took dozens of photos and sent them to family and friends in the United States, everyone commenting on how happy and fulfilled he looked. The next day, he went to Sugarloaf Mountain by cable car. The ride up was exciting, and up there he had a completely different perspective of the city. He could see Copacabana from a unique angle, the green mountains surrounding Rio, and that incredible contrast between urban and natural that makes this city so special. Mark also explored the historic center, visited the Metropolitan Cathedral, walked through Cinelândia, and was enchanted by the colonial architecture mixed with modern buildings. He made sure to try the local cuisine, tasted açaí, beach pastries, mortadella sandwiches, and fell in love with caipirinha. Everywhere he went, he tried to talk to people in Portuguese and was happy when he could communicate and be understood. During those first days, Mark felt completely safe. He had researched security in Rio de Janeiro, knew he needed to be careful, but up to that point he hadn't had any problems. People were friendly and helpful, and he was feeling increasingly confident to explore the city. On Thursday night, Mark decided it was time to experience Rio's nightlife. He had heard about Copacabana's bars, live music, the joy of Brazilians, and wanted to experience that. After dinner at a restaurant near the hotel, he decided to walk along the waterfront and look for an interesting place to have a drink and maybe meet some people. The night was perfect. The temperature was pleasant, there was a gentle breeze coming from the sea, and the Copacabana waterfront was bustling. Families walked on the sidewalk. Young people played soccer on the sand even in the dark, and the bars and restaurants were full of life. Mark felt part of that environment, as if he had finally found the place where he had always wanted to be. He stopped at some smaller bars first, ordered beer, watched the movement, listened to Brazilian music, and tried to talk to other people. His Portuguese was improving every day, and he could maintain basic conversations about tourism, work, and culture. People seemed genuinely interested in learning about the United States, and he loved telling them about his life in San Francisco. Around 11 at night, Mark entered a slightly larger bar, with live music and a livelier atmosphere. The place was packed. There was a group playing samba, and people were dancing. He ordered a caipirinha and watched the movement, fascinated by that contagious energy you can only find in Brazil. It was at that moment that two women approached him. The first one was named Anna, about 30 years old, long curly hair, a charming smile, and spoke perfect English. The second introduced herself as Carol, a bit younger, blonde, very friendly, and also spoke English very well. They seemed to be longtime friends and were clearly having fun. Anna was the first to strike up a conversation. She asked if Mark was a tourist, where he came from, how long he had been in Rio. When she learned he was American, she showed great interest, said she loved American culture and had always dreamed of visiting the United States. Carol added to the conversation, asking questions about San Francisco, about his work, about what he thought of Brazil. Mark was immediately charmed by both of them. They were beautiful, intelligent, spoke English fluently, seemed to have a good cultural level, and showed genuine interest in him. More importantly, they seemed to know Rio de Janeiro very well, and offered to show him places that tourists normally don't know about. The conversation flowed naturally. Anna said she worked in tourism, that she knew all the best places in the city, from traditional tourist spots to places frequented only by locals. Carol said she was a language student and loved meeting people from other countries. They made Mark feel special, as if he were the most interesting person they had ever met. Mark bought drinks for them, and the three continued talking for more than an hour. Anna and Carol told funny stories about Rio de Janeiro, explained Brazilian slang, taught some words in Portuguese, and made Mark laugh like he hadn't laughed in a long time. He felt completely comfortable, as if he had known these women for years. During the conversation, they mentioned other interesting places to visit in Rio. They talked about bars with live music in Santa Teresa, about viewpoints with incredible views that few tourists know about beaches that are less crowded but equally beautiful. Mark was absorbing every word, taking mental notes of all the places they suggested. Around midnight, Anna suggested they go somewhere else. She said she knew an incredible bar, frequented by local artists and musicians, where they played the best samba in the city. The place was in a nearby neighborhood, it was safe, and it would be a unique opportunity for Mark to experience authentic Rio de Janeiro, away from tourist routes. Mark hesitated for a moment. He knew he shouldn't go out with people he had just met, especially at night, in a city he didn't know well. But Anna and Carol seemed so sincere, so friendly, that he decided to trust them. Besides, they were two women, which made him feel safer. He thought it would be a unique opportunity to live an authentic experience in Rio de Janeiro. They left the bar and walked a few blocks to the place Anna had mentioned. It really was a different environment, more intimate, with rustic decoration and live music. The place was full of people who seemed to be locals, artists, musicians. Mark felt privileged to be there, as if he had discovered a secret that few tourists know about. Anna got a table for them and suggested they try a typical Brazilian drink that Mark didn't know yet. She said it was a house specialty, prepared with local ingredients, and it would be a unique experience. Mark, who was feeling adventurous and confident, accepted the suggestion without hesitation. The drink had a different taste, sweeter than he was used to, but not unpleasant. Anna and Carol ordered the same thing, and the three toasted to their new friendship and the incredible night they were having. The conversation continued flowing. They told more stories about Rio, asked about Mark's life in the United States, about his plans for the rest of the trip. Here I need to make an important pause in this story. If you're enjoying the content and want to know more about how to protect yourself from scams like this during your travels, I created special material for you. In the description of this video or in the first pinned comment, you'll find the link to download the ebook Brazil Unlocked. In this complete guide, I reveal all the most common scams applied against tourists in Brazil and, more importantly, how to identify and avoid each one of them. It's material that can literally save your trip and your money. Don't forget to download it right now. Going back to Mark's story, he was feeling increasingly relaxed and confident. The drink was taking effect. He was laughing a lot at the girls' stories and felt like he was living the authentic Brazilian experience he had always dreamed of. Anna and Carol seemed increasingly interested in him, asking questions about his personal life, his relationships, his future plans. Mark told them he was single, had recently ended a long relationship, and this trip to Brazil was a way to start life over. The girls showed sympathy and understanding, said Brazil was the perfect place to heal the heart and find new energy. Carol even suggested he consider staying longer in Rio, that there were many opportunities for Americans who wanted to work or invest in Brazil. As the night went on, Mark began to feel a little strange. At first, he attributed it to alcohol and fatigue from the last few days of intensive tourism. But there was something different, a dizziness that wasn't normal, a growing difficulty concentrating. Anna and Carol's voices seemed to be coming from far away, even though they were sitting right next to him. Anna noticed that Mark was feeling unwell and showed concern. She said it was probably fatigue combined with the tropical climate and suggested they go somewhere quieter. Carol agreed and said she knew a nearby place where Mark could rest a bit and recover. They offered to accompany him, ensuring they would take care of him until he felt better. Mark tried to protest, said maybe it would be better to go back to the hotel, but his words were coming out confused and he was having trouble concentrating. Anna and Carol insisted it wasn't safe for him to go back alone in that condition, that they were responsible for him since they had suggested leaving that first bar. They seemed genuinely concerned about his well-being. The walk to the next location was a blur for Mark. He vaguely remembers being supported by Anna and Carol, passing through some streets he didn't recognize, entering somewhere that seemed to be an apartment or house. The last clear memories he has are of sitting on a couch, with Anna bringing him a glass of water and Carol saying he needed to rest a bit. After that, everything became a blur. Mark remembers disconnected fragments, distant voices, the sensation of being moved, dim lights, and then nothing more. It was as if a switch had been turned off in his mind. The last thing that went through his head before completely losing consciousness was a strange feeling that something wasn't right, but he could no longer react or think clearly. The next hours of Mark's life are a complete void. He has no memory of what happened between the moment he lost consciousness and the moment he woke up. It's as if that period had been completely erased from his memory, as if he had been disconnected from reality for hours on end. If you've ever been in an unsafe situation during your travels, or if you know someone who was a victim of a scam in Brazil, leave a comment telling your experience. Also, don't forget to like this video so more people can watch and protect themselves. Your interaction is very important for this content to reach more travelers. What really happened during those lost hours was only discovered later, through police investigation and some memory fragments that returned to Mark days later. And what happened is much more shocking than you can imagine. After Mark completely lost consciousness on the couch of that apartment, Anna and Carol revealed their true nature. They weren't friendly Brazilian tourists who wanted to meet an interesting American. They were professional criminals, specialized in the scam known as the Goodnight Cinderella, and Mark had become another victim of their well-rehearsed operation. The apartment where they took Mark wasn't a common residence. It was a place specifically prepared for this type of crime, rented with false documents and strategically located in an old building with poor security. The walls were thick enough to muffle any sound. The windows had heavy curtains that prevented anyone from seeing what was happening inside, and the place was furnished only with the essentials for their criminal operations. The first thing Anna and Carol did was completely search Mark. They worked with the efficiency of surgeons, checking every pocket of his clothes, every fold of fabric, looking for cards, money, keys, anything of value. They found his brown leather wallet, which contained $300 in cash and 2 credit cards from different American banks. But the scam was even more sophisticated than that. Carol, during the hours they spent talking at the bar, had subtly observed all of Mark's habits. She noticed where he kept his room key, how he handled his cards, even small gestures that revealed information about his personality and behavioral patterns. When Mark went to the bathroom in the first bar, Carol quickly took the magnetic key from his pocket and made a copy using a small electronic device she carried in her purse. While Anna stayed in the apartment watching Mark, who was deeply unconscious due to the drug they had put in his drink, Carol used the duplicated key to enter his hotel room. She went up there acting like a concerned friend who had come back to get medicines or important documents. The night receptionist didn't even question it. A well-dressed woman speaking perfect Portuguese didn't arouse any suspicion. In Mark's room, Carol went directly to the places where he had mentioned during the conversation that he kept his important belongings. Mark, trying to be friendly and open, had casually commented about his travel habits, including where he usually hid extra money for emergencies. Carol found $2,500 hidden in a special compartment of his suitcase, exactly where he had said he kept his emergency money. Carol also searched through all of Mark's other belongings, looking for more cards, important documents, or anything else that could be valuable. She photographed pages of his passport, noted personal information that could be useful later, and even checked his medications to make sure there was nothing that could interfere with the drug they had administered. Back at the apartment, Carol found Anna prepared for the most delicate part of the operation, extracting the credit card passwords from Mark. Anna had specific experience in interrogating people under the influence of drugs. She knew exactly how to formulate questions, what tone of voice to use, how to create an atmosphere of trust, even with someone in an altered state of consciousness. Anna approached Mark, who was breathing heavily on the couch, clearly under the heavy influence of the substance they had put in his drink. She began speaking in English with a maternal and concerned tone. "Mark, are you okay? It's me, Anna, your friend. You're feeling sick, but I'm here to help you." Mark, with his mind completely confused by the drug, could hear and partially process what Anna was saying, but couldn't distinguish between reality and fantasy. His judgment was completely compromised, but he could still respond to simple questions and follow basic commands. Anna continued, "Mark, listen to me carefully. You had a health problem and I need to use your card to buy medicine for you. What's the password for your blue card?" She held the first card very close to Mark's eyes, making him focus on the object. In Mark's altered mind, that made perfect sense. He thought he was having a medical emergency and that Anna was trying to help him by buying medications or paying for medical care. Without any resistance, he mumbled the 4 digits of the first card's password. Anna carefully wrote down the numbers and repeated the question to confirm. Mark, still believing he was being helped, repeated the same sequence of numbers. Anna then showed the second card and repeated the entire process. "And this red card, Mark? What's the password for this one?" Mark provided the second card's password with the same ease, convinced he was cooperating with someone who wanted his well-being. With both passwords in hand, Anna immediately left the apartment to carry out the sequence of withdrawals they had planned. It was exactly 2:15 in the morning when she arrived at the first ATM, located on a busy street in Copacabana. Anna had chosen this time strategically, late enough to avoid crowds, but early enough not to seem suspicious to security cameras. Anna knew perfectly the location and characteristics of each ATM she intended to use. She had spent weeks studying routes, movement schedules, security camera angles, and even withdrawal limits of different banks. She wore a black cap and dark glasses, even though it was early morning, to make any later identification difficult. The first withdrawal was made without any problem. Anna inserted Mark's card, typed the password that Carol had extracted, and withdrew $1,000, the maximum limit allowed per transaction at that specific bank. The machine dispensed the bills in American dollars, an option available at some ATMs in the South Zone to serve foreign tourists. Anna knew she needed to wait exactly 30 minutes before being able to make a new transaction with the same card. During this wait, she walked calmly to a nearby 24-hour snack bar, ordered coffee, and discreetly observed the street movement. She constantly checked if anyone was paying attention to her or if there was any unusual police activity in the area. While Anna made the first withdrawal, Carol continued at the apartment, keeping watch over Mark. She took advantage of this time to do an even more detailed search of his belongings. Carol managed to unlock Mark's cell phone, another sign that the drug was taking full effect, since he had provided the password when she asked, saying she needed to call a doctor. On the phone, Carol found valuable information. She checked messages exchanged with family in the United States, where Mark mentioned his detailed travel plans, how much money he had brought, where he was staying, and even comments about traveling alone. Carol also discovered that Mark had a third bank account, a savings account with approximately $15,000, but this account didn't have a physical card associated with it, only digital access. Carol tried to access the savings account through the banking app on Mark's phone, but discovered she needed biometric authentication that she couldn't bypass with him unconscious. Even so, she wrote down all the account information, knowing this data could be sold later to other criminals specialized in digital fraud. During this time, Mark drifted in and out of consciousness irregularly. There were moments when he opened his eyes and saw Carol handling his phone or organizing his belongings, but his drugged mind interpreted these actions in a completely distorted way. He thought she was calling doctors, organizing documents for a hospital, or taking care of him somehow. The drug created a parallel reality where everything seemed logical and safe. At 2:45 in the morning, Anna headed to the second ATM, located about 8 blocks from the first. She had carefully planned a route that passed through streets with less concentration of surveillance cameras and avoided very well-lit areas. The second withdrawal was made with the same efficiency, another $1,000 withdrawn from Mark's account. Anna observed that the available balance on the card was still high, confirming that Mark was a tourist with significant financial resources. She stored the money in a discreet bag she carried and headed to the third point of her planned route. For more information on how to protect yourself from this and other common scams in Brazil, don't forget to download the ebook Brazil Unlocked that I left in the description. In it, you'll find detailed strategies to identify suspicious situations and stay safe during your travels. The third stop was at an ATM located inside a shopping center that operated 24 hours. Anna chose this location because the mall had multiple exits, facilitating a quick escape if something went wrong, and because the movement of people in the place, even in the early morning, would help camouflage her presence among cleaning staff, security guards, and a few people who left late from bars and restaurants. At the mall, Anna made the third withdrawal without incident, another $1,000 from Mark's account. At this point, she had already withdrawn $3,000 using the first card and still had access to the second card, which was linked to a different American bank account. Anna decided to test the second card immediately. She was worried that the American bank might have more rigorous security systems and block suspicious international transactions, but decided to try anyway. To her surprise and satisfaction, the second card was accepted normally, and she managed to withdraw another $2,000 in 2 separate transactions. Around 4:30 in the morning, Anna had completed the entire sequence of withdrawals. In total, she had withdrawn $5,000 from Mark's bank accounts. Adding the $2,500 in cash that Carol had taken from his suitcase, and the $300 that were in his wallet, the total amount stolen reached exactly $8,000. Anna returned to the apartment carrying all the money in a small, discreet backpack. Carol received her with a detailed report of everything that had happened during her absence. Mark continued sleeping heavily, but his vital signs seemed stable, and they knew the drug would start losing effect in a few hours. The two criminals then began the final and riskiest phase of their operation, preparing Mark to be returned to the hotel without raising suspicion. They knew they needed to transport a semi-conscious man through the streets of Rio de Janeiro in the early morning in a way that seemed completely normal to any observer. Carol called Luis, a 50-year-old man who worked as a driver for the criminal group. Luis had extensive experience transporting scam victims and knew exactly how to act in delicate situations. He drove a common car without distinctive features and had false documents in case he was questioned by any authority. While waiting for Luis to arrive, Anna and Carol did a meticulous cleaning of the apartment. They cleaned all the surfaces they had touched to remove fingerprints, organized Mark's belongings exactly as they were before, and put the cards back in his wallet, obviously without the stolen money. Luis arrived at the apartment at 5 in the morning. He helped Anna and Carol dress Mark in his original clothes and put him in the back seat of the car. To any external observer, the scene simply looked like a group of friends helping someone who had drunk too much during a party. Luis had even prepared some empty beer bottles in the car to reinforce this impression. The trip to the hotel took about 20 minutes. Luis drove calmly, respecting all traffic signals and speed limits, avoiding any action that could attract police attention. Anna sat in the front seat while Carol stayed in the back seat with Mark, pretending to console him like a concerned friend. During the trip, Mark briefly woke up. He opened his eyes and saw Carol beside him, but his mind was still completely confused and disoriented. Carol immediately began talking to him in English, using a reassuring tone. "Calm down, Mark. We're taking you back to the hotel. You felt sick at the party, but everything's fine now. You'll feel better after sleeping a bit." Mark tried to speak, but his words came out incomprehensible. He felt like he was floating, without control over his own body. Carol offered him some water from a bottle she had prepared specially. The water contained a small additional dose of sedative, enough to keep him calm and sleepy during the rest of the trip. When they arrived at the hotel, Anna got out first to talk to the night receptionist. She explained in perfect Portuguese that Mark had felt sick during a private party and that they were bringing him back to the hotel where he was staying. The receptionist, accustomed to tourists who overdid it with alcohol during Rio's nightlife, didn't show any suspicion or special concern. Luis and Carol helped Mark enter the hotel lobby. He could walk with support, but was clearly very debilitated and confused. The receptionist even offered to call a doctor or ambulance, but Anna quickly said it wasn't necessary, that Mark had just drunk a little too much, and that they would take care of him during the night. In the elevator, Mark leaned against the wall and mumbled some words in English that no one could completely understand. Carol responded in English too, perfectly maintaining the role of a concerned friend. She said that the next day he would feel much better and that it was normal to have a hangover after trying strong Brazilian drinks for the first time. In the room, they put Mark in bed very carefully and simulated a completely natural hangover scene. Anna slightly messed up his clothes, put a glass of water on the nightstand, left some aspirin tablets she found in his suitcase next to the glass, and even partially opened the window to create the impression that someone had tried to air out the environment due to discomfort. Carol did a final meticulous check of the room, making sure they had left absolutely no evidence of their presence. They cleaned again all the surfaces they had touched, verified that the suitcase was exactly as Mark had left it, and confirmed that the cards were in the correct pockets of his wallet. Before leaving, Anna whispered in Mark's ear in English, "Rest well, honey. Last night was an incredible night you'll always remember." To his confused mind, this would sound like a positive memory when he woke up, not as evidence of a crime he had just suffered. The three left the hotel at 5:40 in the morning. To the receptionist and any staff member who might be watching, they simply looked like two foreign friends who had taken care of a drunk tourist during the night and were now going home. Luis took them to completely different points in the city, where each one followed their own path. This was a standard precaution of the group. They never left the crime scene together, nor went to the same final destination. Ana took a bus to Barra da Tijuca, Carol went to a rented apartment in Botafogo, and Luis stored the car in a garage rented specifically for these criminal operations. The stolen money was divided among the three group members, following a pre-established percentage. Ana and Carol each kept $3,000, and Luis received $2,000 for his participation in the operation. For them, that had been an extremely lucrative and successful night of work. What was most shocking was the absolute naturalness with which the entire operation had been executed. For Ana, Carol, and Luis, this was just another normal day of work. They showed no remorse, emotion, or concern for Mark as a human being. He was simply another naive tourist who had fallen into their carefully crafted trap. Mark's awakening a few hours later was brutal and confusing. He slowly opened his eyes, feeling an intense headache and a sensation of complete disorientation he had never experienced before in his life. For some long and terrifying seconds, he couldn't identify where he was. Everything around him seemed familiar, but at the same time completely strange and threatening. Gradually, Mark realized he was in his hotel room, lying in bed, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. The first sensation was confused relief. He thought maybe he had simply drunk too much, that Ana and Carol had helped him get back to the hotel, and that everything was just a particularly severe hangover. But as he gradually recovered consciousness, Mark realized something was deeply wrong. His clothes were misaligned in a way that didn't make sense. There was a horrible metallic taste in his mouth that he had never experienced, and he felt like he had been hit by a truck and then trampled by a crowd. Mark desperately tried to remember what had happened the night before. He could perfectly recall the initial meeting with Ana and Carol, the animated and interesting conversation in the first bar, the decision to go to another place they had suggested. But after that, his memories became progressively more fragmented and confused, until they disappeared completely. Trying to physically recover, Mark got up from bed with extreme difficulty. His legs were wobbly and unstable. He felt intense nausea that came in waves and a generalized weakness that seemed to affect every muscle in his body. He staggered to the bathroom, washed his face with cold water, and tried to organize his chaotic thoughts. There was something deeply disturbing and violating about this entire situation. Mark couldn't explain exactly what it was, but felt a visceral sensation that something terrible had happened to him during those lost hours. It was as if his body and mind knew something that his conscious memory couldn't access. That's when Mark decided to systematically check all his belongings. He was always extremely careful and organized with his documents and money when traveling, kept everything in specific places, and always did regular checks. He started by checking his wallet, which normally stayed in his back pants pocket. When Mark opened his wallet, he felt his heart race violently. All the money that was in it had completely disappeared. It was approximately $300 in bills of various denominations that he always carried for daily expenses during the trip. The wallet was in the right place. The cards seemed to all be there, but the money had vanished without a trace. But this was just the beginning of a nightmare that was gradually revealing itself. Mark ran to the suitcase where he kept his most important documents and the rest of the trip money. With his hands trembling uncontrollably, he opened the secret compartment where he had carefully hidden $2,500 in new $100 bills. The compartment was completely empty. The money had disappeared without leaving any trace. Mark desperately searched through the entire suitcase, checked all the pockets of clothes, looked under the bed, in the bathroom, in every possible corner of the room. Nothing. It was as if the money had simply evaporated during the night. Absolute panic took hold of Mark. He realized it wasn't possible that the money had disappeared by itself. Someone had entered his room, had searched through his most intimate belongings, and had stolen a significant amount of money. But how was this possible? How had someone gotten access to his room? Then Mark remembered the credit cards. He always carried 2 different cards. one for normal trip expenses and another reserved exclusively for emergencies. With growing fear and a sensation of nausea that had nothing to do with a hangover, he grabbed his phone and desperately accessed the bank's apps. What Mark saw on the app screens made his world completely collapse. There were multiple transactions that had been made during the early morning, all at different ATMs spread throughout the city. Someone had used his cards to systematically withdraw money for hours, always at the maximum limit allowed per transaction. The transactions started precisely at 2:15 in the morning and continued methodically until 4:30. They were withdrawals of $1,000 at a time, executed with a precision that indicated detailed knowledge of banking systems and security limits. In total, $5,000 had been withdrawn from his accounts during those hours when he was completely unconscious. Adding the money withdrawn from the cards to the cash that was stolen directly from his belongings, Mark calculated he had lost exactly $8,000 in a single night. It was a devastating amount, representing a large part of the savings he had accumulated specifically to fulfill his dream of visiting Brazil. The initial despair gave way to intense anger, which then transformed into deep fear. Mark began to gradually understand that he didn't remember anything that happened between the moment he felt sick in the second bar and the moment he woke up in the hotel. Entire hours of his life had been completely erased from his memory. Mark desperately tried to call the banks in the United States, but due to the time zone difference, he couldn't talk to anyone immediately. He sent urgent emails, blocked the cards through the apps, and tried to dispute all fraudulent transactions. But he knew the process would be long, complex, and especially complicated by being in another country. The sensation of violation was absolutely overwhelming. Mark couldn't stop thinking about how Anna and Carol had gotten access to his cards, and more terrifyingly, to his personal passwords. He had always been extremely careful with banking information, never shared passwords with anyone, always typed numbers discreetly. Then Mark had a terrible realization that made him physically nauseous. If Anna and Carol got the cards, the passwords, and access to his hotel room, that meant he had been completely defenseless and vulnerable for hours. They had total access to him, his belongings, his intimacy, and his dignity while he was unconscious. The idea that complete strangers had had absolute control over him for hours while he was in a state of total vulnerability was simply terrifying. Mark began to understand that he had been the victim of something much more serious and violating than a simple robbery. Mark desperately tried to reconstruct the events of the night before. He clearly remembered drinking only beer in the first bar, where he met Anna and Carol. Then at the second location, he had tried that special drink that Anna had recommended. It was obvious now that something had been put in that drink. He immediately searched the internet about drugs used in crimes and discovered about the Goodnight Cinderella. It was exactly what had happened to him. A colorless and odorless substance, probably put in his drink without him noticing, that caused drowsiness, complete disorientation, and total memory loss. The discovery brought a contradictory mixture of relief and absolute horror. Relief for understanding that he wasn't going crazy, and that there was a medical explanation for his memory loss. Horror for realizing the diabolic sophistication of the crime and his own total vulnerability. Mark realized he had been chosen as a target from the moment Anna and Carol approached him in the first bar. All the interest they showed, all the questions about his life and his plans, all the sympathy and charm, everything had been a carefully planned performance to identify him as a profitable victim. The subsequent police investigation revealed even more shocking details about the criminal operation that victimized Mark. Anna and Carol were completely fictitious names. They were part of an organized criminal network that specialized in scams against foreign tourists, operating for at least 3 years in Rio de Janeiro. The group had an impressive professional structure. Besides the 2 women who made first contact with victims, there were at least 6 other people involved. Specialized drivers, people responsible for renting apartments with false documents, technology specialists who created devices to copy keys and cards, and even informants who worked in hotels providing information about guests with financial potential. The police discovered this specific group had already applied similar scams to at least 60 different tourists in the last 2 years. Mark was just another victim on a long list of people who had suffered the same type of elaborate crime. The modus operandi was always similar: identify single tourists with financial resources, gain trust through attractive and friendly women, drug the victims, and steal everything possible. The detective responsible for the investigation explained to Mark that groups like this are extremely difficult to capture because they operate very organizationally and cautiously. They never use the same locations twice in a row, always change their identities and appearance, rarely leave physical evidence that can be traced, and have sophisticated systems to launder the stolen money. Unfortunately, the investigations into Mark's case didn't lead to any effective arrests. Anna, Carol, Luis, and all the other group members simply disappeared after the crime. The apartment was abandoned and cleaned meticulously. The car used in transport was found burned in a distant neighborhood, and all investigative leads quickly went cold. In the months following the crime, Mark faced a long and frustrating process trying to recover at least part of the stolen money. The travel insurance he had purchased covered only a small fraction of the losses, claiming he had voluntarily provided the card passwords, even though under the influence of coercive drugs. The bank managed to reverse some of the smaller transactions, but most of the money was considered a permanent loss. At the end of all bureaucratic processes, Mark managed to recover only about $2,000 of the $8,000 he had lost. The other $6,000 represented a devastating financial loss that affected his personal finances for years. But Mark discovered that true recovery wasn't related to the lost money. It was about his ability to process the psychological trauma, to learn from the terrible experience, and to not allow it to negatively define his future life or his ability to trust other people. He sought specialized psychological help to deal with the complex feelings of violation, vulnerability, and loss of control. The therapist explained that victims of the Goodnight Cinderella scam frequently develop symptoms similar to those of other forms of violence, including anxiety, paranoia, and difficulty trusting social situations. Now, let me share 3 fundamental tips that can protect you from falling for the same terrible scam that Mark suffered. The first and most important tip is never accept drinks from people you just met, even if they seem extremely nice and trustworthy. If someone offers to buy you a drink, go with them to the bar and personally watch the entire preparation of the drink. Never leave your drink unattended on the table, not even for a few seconds. The second crucial tip is to always keep your important documents and large amounts of money in safe places at the hotel, preferably in the safe. When going out for activities, take only the money strictly necessary for that specific day. Set low daily withdrawal limits on your cards when traveling, and activate real-time transaction alerts on your phone. The third tip is to always trust your instincts and have a well-defined security plan. If something seems too good to be true, it's probably suspicious. Always inform someone you trust about your evening plans and establish specific times to make contact. If you don't get in touch at the agreed time, that person should immediately seek help. But for those who really want comprehensive and complete protection against all types of scams that happen specifically in Brazil, I created specialized material that can literally save your trip, your money, and even your life. It's the Brazil Unlocked ebook that's available in the description of this video or in the first pinned comment. In this complete and detailed guide, I reveal not only the Goodnight Cinderella scam that brutally victimized Mark, but all other most common and sophisticated criminal schemes applied specifically against tourists in Brazil. You'll learn about fake police officers who approach tourists claiming document verifications, elaborate scams on beaches where criminals pose as legitimate vendors, fraud in tourist excursions offered by unauthorized people, organized schemes in public transportation, scams in restaurants where dishonest employees clone cards, and much more. More importantly, Brazil Unlocked doesn't just explain scams theoretically, but teaches exactly how to identify each suspicious situation before becoming a victim. These are practical, detailed, and tested strategies that can literally make the difference between having the trip of your dreams and living the devastating nightmare that Mark experienced. The ebook also includes important emergency numbers organized by city, specific tips on how to choose truly safe accommodations, recommendations about reliable transportation, maps of areas that should be avoided, and even useful phrases in Portuguese for emergency situations. I invested more than 6 months intensively researching and compiling all this vital information. I talked to dozens of victims, consulted security experts, analyzed police data, and studied criminal methods. All of this is concentrated in this material that I could sell for a high price, but I decided to make it available to protect as many tourists as possible. Brazil Unlocked can literally be the difference between having an incredible experience in Brazil and becoming another tragic statistic. Don't forget to download it right now by clicking the link in the description or in the first pinned comment. Mark's traumatic story shows that anyone can be a victim of this type of elaborate crime, regardless of age, education, travel experience, or personal caution. Anna and Carol were extremely professional criminals who dedicated their lives to studying and exploiting human psychology. The most important thing to understand is that Mark had no fault in what happened. He was a victim of manipulation specialists who know exactly how to exploit our natural tendency to trust friendly people. The fault is never the victim's in cases like this. If you're planning a trip to Brazil, use Mark's experience as learning, but don't let it discourage you. Brazil is an extraordinary country with genuinely hospitable people. Anna and Carol represent a criminal minority that doesn't define the character of the Brazilian people. If you enjoyed this true story and want to continue receiving travel safety content, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Each subscription motivates me to continue bringing stories that can protect lives. Hit the like button to help more people find this vital content. Your like can save someone from going through the same trauma Mark experienced, and leave a comment telling me what you thought of this story. Your experience can help other travelers. Remember, download Brazil Unlocked right now, travel safely, but never stop exploring the world. Until the next video.